Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeat Ron, and today we're going to be doing another Overclock tier list. This is on the Hurricane guided missile system for Gunner. We're going to be talking about all their overclocks, and we're going to be ranking them in our tier system. Let me start off this video like I started off with all my videos, saying this is completely my own opinion, and if you have a different opinion, that is perfectly okay and awesome. As well as my opinion could shift over time anyway. And let me explain kind of the tiers and what they sort of mean to me. S tiers for pretty much anything that's overpowered, broken, overtuned, just crazy good. Kind of self-explanatory there. A tier is for all the great overclocks, everything that you pretty much want to have but isn't necessarily overpowered. B tier is anything that's above average, still a bonus for the gun, still a really good overclock to have the majority of the time. C tier is for kind of the average overclocks or overclocks that are very highly specialized. I feel like it's more highly specialized than necessarily just average. Highly specialized overclocks that you kind of have to build for that aren't always the best in every situation. And then D tier is more or less the disappointing overclocks, the ones that I wish would get buffed or tweaked a bit, reworked in some way because they don't do as much as I would like them to do. So let's begin with our first one, which is Manual Guidance Cutoff. This one is already not a great one, I would say. This one makes it so once you release the trigger from firing the Hurricane, you no longer have the guidance system. So you can no longer control the rockets after that. The upside of this is that you do have a 33% increase in rocket velocity. So your projectiles will get to their targets quicker, but you can't control them unless you're holding down the trigger. That's not really a great thing. I would rather not have this overclock than have it on, which is kind of disappointing because if it was just that this is more velocity, it would be great. As to where it is now, it makes the gun feel kind of weird because you'll still probably be holding the trigger down during groups and stuff like that, so you can still control during groups. But against single targets, you're probably not, you're not always going to be firing at long range anyway with this. If you are going to be firing at long range, hopefully the target stays there or walks to where you've shot it. And it might be a little bit easier for you to hit, but I honestly feel like this is one of the more disappointing overclocks just in the game in general. I feel like it should do more or something. I don't know, maybe some people like it. I really don't. I feel like the only thing this gets you is like the tier 2 bigger jet engine, and not even quite that, because at least that gives you turn rate and stuff too. So it feels like that at that point, I feel like just taking the autocannon or the minigun would make more sense even at a distance. Maybe not the autocannon, but the minigun definitely would. So this one I think is going to go into D tier. I kind of wish it was better. I feel like it needs a little bit more, like another bonus or something, some reason to want to turn off the cutoff. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not getting it though. Maybe it is actually better than I think it is. Tell me your thoughts down in the comments if you've used it and you really enjoy it, and the playstyle that you're using it for. I can see it being kind of useful like that close to medium range where you don't really need the rocket system. Our next overclock is the Overtuned feed mechanism. This one is great. This one gives you one more rate of fire, which is huge for this weapon, and it gives you faster projectile speed. This one feels like a straight upgrade from this one because it doesn't take away from your ability to actually guide the rockets, which is one of the funnest things about the Hurricane. But you still get the velocity, not quite as much, but you still get velocity and you get improved rate of fire. This is all around really good and probably one of the best overclocks for this weapon, I would say. I don't think it's S tier though. It doesn't turn the weapon into anything crazy. It is fun to run full attack speed with this though. Get up to 5 rockets per second. That's pretty cool. So this one's going to go up into A tier. This one's really good. And then we have Fragmentation Missiles. This one's also a good one. This one increases your area damage by 2, and it increases your explosion radius by 0.5 meter. So that is pretty good. You can run this with just a regular loadout and have a little bit more explosion radius and a little bit more damage. You can run this with an all damage loadout and get a little bit more damage. You could run this with all explosion and have a bigger explosion radius, which is the way that I usually like to run this one. This one's pretty good. This one isn't all that odd. It's just a straight buff to the gun. I'd put it up into B tier. I can see people arguing it into A tier though. It's on the very high end of B tier. It's good. But I don't think it is necessarily better than like the Overtuned feed mechanism or some of the other overclocks we put into A tier. Then we move on to our balanced overclocks. Our first one is Plasma Burster Missiles. This one is definitely my favorite overclock from this, but as it's been pointed out to me, this one is kind of bugged and just doesn't work that well in multiplayer. In multiplayer, sometimes your missiles just disappear after you've shot them. They just don't exist. So that's really annoying, at least if you're joining the game. If you're hosting it, that's not an issue. As well as on escort missions, for whatever reason, this one always destroys the rocks super fast. I think it still would, even if it wasn't bugged to where you're killing them way quicker than you ever should. I feel like this would still do really well against that. But that is an issue that does need to be fixed. It's really good for wave clear. It does take a lot of getting used to with the Plasma Burster Missiles, though, because you lower your damage by a lot. You cut pretty much your explosive damage, your explosive radius, and your direct damage in half when taking this overclock, as well as you cut your ammo pretty much in half. But your projectiles can then punch through multiple enemies and then explode pretty much like the Plasma Bursters do with the Engineer. That is really good. It makes it really good for horde clear. It makes it really good for single target damage. It makes it good for a mixed crowd because you can just punch through multiple enemies and move the rockets back and forth. If you go full turn rate, you can pretty much turn these instantly into any direction you want them to go and hit whatever enemy you're pointing at. It's a lot of fun to use, but with all those downsides, I don't really know where to put this. If you're hosting it, then I would probably put this one into the low end of A tier. I think it's good. But if you're just joining games and you're trying to use this one, it's going to be extremely frustrating. And I could easily see people putting this down into D tier because it's just, they don't want to go through the frustration of using this weapon or this overclock when you could just run something like Overtuned feed mechanism where your gun just actually works, or Fragmentation Missiles where your gun works, or even the manual guidance where your gun works. It's just not a great buff. So yeah, I don't know where to put Plasma Burster Missiles. They're probably S tier in terms of fun, but they're A tier when they're working, or B tier when they're working. I could see people putting it one of those two categories. And then we've got Mine Layer System. This one makes it so you can't turn your missiles anymore. They just go straight where you shoot them, and this embeds mines in the ground. These work very similar to the minelets, like the cryo minelets or the electro minelets that the scout and the gunner have. And these just are explosive minelets. I guess you are playing the gunner, so your burst pistol, what your burst pistol has. You can lay these down, and then if enemies walk across them, you do more damage, and the damage scales with your area damage. So you can run more area damage on this build, and that's usually what I like to run with it, and you can do a lot of damage to single targets. This one I've noticed is also very similar to the Plasma Burster, where sometimes your mines just don't show up. They just disappear if you're not hosting. If you are hosting, then it's way more consistent. So again, I could see this one being put real low because of that issue. This one is also kind of an odd one to use because your mines don't last very long. Your mines last a total of 15 seconds. So you can't put these down like you could proximity mines with the Engineer and leave them there for a very long time, and you'll probably get a lot of use out of them, especially in hold the area locations like on escort missions, on salvage missions, on dreadnought missions. This one works pretty well in those missions too, but you have to actively be using them. You can just shoot this regularly at enemies, and at that point you're not really losing much in terms of what the base Hurricane can do. So this one, it's a bit odd. I think I'd put this one lower than the Plasma Bursters. I think I'd put this one into B tier. Mostly because I don't really enjoy the playstyle of it as much as some of these other ones. I'd probably rather have these three here, assuming that the game is actually working. Otherwise, these two are definitely the ones that are I'm picking on, like, joining missions. So it's a bit weird with the Mine Layer. I like the idea, but it's a little bit difficult to use a lot of the time. So I feel like B tier is fair. Unless, again, the game just isn't letting you play, and then in which case it's D tier, and the same with any of the overclocks that just kind of break the game in that way. Anyway, moving on to our unstable overclocks, our first one is the Jet Fuel Homebrew, which this one increases your direct damage by a lot. It decreases your ammo, it decreases your magazine, and it decreases your area damage. Oh, and it decreases your area effect damage, at least radius. But it increases your projectile speed. This one is really good. This one's really strong. You can get it to where you can two-shot body shot grunts very easy with this. You can one-shot headshot grunts with this, which is also pretty great. It completely shreds things like, well, just anything that's big. So Praetorians, Dreadnoughts, Oppressors, anything like that that you can hit directly with this, especially if you're hitting weak spots, you can completely rip them apart. You do lose out on that ammo, and you do lose out on the magazine, so if you go all damage or even less, you probably want to take a secondary that has more ammo. Maybe magic bullets in the revolver or the custom casings for the burst pistol. Those ones would probably be the best. I think it's custom casings for the burst pistol, whichever one the ammo one is. I think it's compact mags. I see it right there. So that one helps too. This one's great though. I think it's probably one of the best overclocks for this weapon. I'd put this one high up into A tier. I think it's really good. And then our last overclock is Salvo module. Salvo module is a really fun overclock, and it's a pretty decent overclock too. This makes it so when you're holding down the trigger, you no longer just keep firing missiles like you normally would with any of these other overclocks, or just with the base Hurricane. You then start charging up missiles, and you could charge up to 9 of them and fire it out like a shotgun that deals very high damage to anything because you're shooting 9 missiles at it. But every time that you load up a missile, each missile that you load up gets additional starting and, moving velocity. So your shots move faster than they normally would. As well as for each missile loaded up, you do additional damage. This is a pretty good overclock, I would say. It's definitely one of the funnest ones. It's not really a downside either because it doesn't come with any sort of downside other than you can't just hold down the trigger of your gun anymore. If you want to fire one missile at a time, you can just fire one missile at a time and you can control each of those missiles. You can do this quick too if you just fire like 5 missiles out and then you can control all of them that are still remaining. Or you can hold it in, charge up, 3, 4 missiles, however many you want, all 9 missiles, and then let it loose. Deal a huge amount of damage to either crowds or to single targets. I found it's really good to charge up 3 or 4 of them fired into a crowd. You're going to kill a lot of them. I also usually like running damage with this build. Ammo can also be pretty useful. It works really with any build that you want to, which is unusual for an unstable overclock. So this one is probably A tier as well. I'm not sure if it's as good as either of these two, because these two feel like straight upgrades. At least this one's straight upgrade for killing big stuff. This one is just a straight upgrade for the Hurricane. This is probably where I'd put all the Hurricane overclocks. For the most part, they have some pretty good ones. The only one that stands out to me is this one that's just, it's not my thing. And potentially these two that just need to be fixed because they're just broken at the moment. Next time we're going to be looking at all of Gunner's overclocks. And then after that, we're going to be looking at everybody's overclocks again, which should be a lot of fun. Tell me what your thoughts are down in the comments below, especially on all these overclocks, how you like them, where you would put them, and how you've been enjoying the Hurricane. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. If you would like to have access to early videos, check the links out in the description below. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great day. And remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.